Under the golden morning sun, the historic stones of Buckingham Palace glowed softly, their ancient presence watching over another day of ceremony and tradition. Tourists gathered, their laughter and camera clicks filling the air with an easy kind of joy. It was the sort of scene people traveled thousands of miles to witness, the stillness and strength of the Royal Guards, standing as symbols of duty and honor. But on this day, something different stirred beneath the surface. A man in his 40s, stocky and loud, with tattoos crawling up his arms, pushed through the crowd. At his side, a powerful bulldog named Cupcake strained against the leash, muscles rippling, growling low. The man's voice cut through the chatter, dripping with mockery as he jeered at the motionless guard before him. It seemed like a game to him, a chance to show off, to provoke, to see if he could make the unshakable soldier flinch. And for a moment, the crowd wasn't sure what to feel. Some pulled their children closer, others raised their phones, sensing that something was about to unfold. Tension grew thick in the air, the kind that makes your heart beat faster even if you're only watching from the sidelines. What they didn't know, what the man didn't realize, was that this guard, standing still as stone, carried within him not just ceremonial discipline, but years of military service and a deep, unspoken knowledge about creatures like the bulldog lunging at him. His name was James Harrison, a former soldier who had walked through war zones far more dangerous than this palace courtyard. And behind that stoic face, he was already reading every subtle signal. The dog's conflicted body language, the tightening grip on the leash, the shifting mood of the crowd. In the next few moments, something remarkable was about to happen. Not just a clash between man and beast, but a powerful lesson about true authority, about the difference between fear and respect, about how even the most aggressive energy can be transformed with understanding. So stay with me, because what you're about to witness isn't just a story about a guard and a dog, it's a story about all of us, about leadership, compassion, and the incredible strength that lies in calm confidence. And as we unfold this tale, you might just find yourself rethinking what power really looks like. Ready? Let's begin. It started like any other sunny morning at Buckingham Palace. Families gathered at the gates, children on their tiptoes trying to catch a glimpse of the famous Royal Guards. Tourists from all over America, Japan, Germany, their voices blending together in excitement. For many, this was a dream moment, to stand before history, to see those guards in their bright scarlet coats, so still they seemed carved from stone. But then the mood shifted. Subtly at first, the way a sudden chill runs down your back, even when the sun is shining. People began to notice a man pushing his way to the front, stocky, rough, with tattoos marking his arms like warning signs. He wasn't here for the tradition or the beauty. No, he had brought something else entirely. A powerful bulldog, muscles taut under a brown and white coat, growling low, straining at the leash. His name was Marcus Reed, and from the very first moment, his intentions were clear. He wasn't just walking his dog. He was looking for a show. He taunted the guard, loud enough for everyone to hear. Let's see if this fancy soldier moves when Cupcake here gives him a proper hello. His words dripped with mockery, and people in the crowd began to shift uncomfortably. A mother pulled her little boy close. An older couple exchanged worried glances. Even the tourists who had been filming lowered their phones, sensing that this wasn't the fun spectacle they had come for. And here's where the danger truly began. You see, in Britain, bringing a dog to a public place like Buckingham Palace isn't illegal, but using an animal to threaten, intimidate, or provoke violence, that's a serious offence. In fact, under the UK's Dangerous Dogs Act, even allowing your pet to make someone feel endangered can lead to criminal charges. This wasn't just bad behavior, it was a crime unfolding in plain sight. And yet, for a few long moments, no one stepped in. That's the strange thing about public confrontations. People freeze, some out of fear, others because they think, surely someone else will stop this. Maybe you've seen this happen before, on a subway, in a park, at a crowded event. That ripple of unease when things shift from normal to dangerous, and everyone hopes someone else will intervene. But in that courtyard, only one person stood calm and unmoved. The guard, James Harrison. While the bulldog's growl grew louder, and Reed's taunt sharper, Harrison remained as still as the palace walls behind him. On the surface, he looked like every other guard, disciplined, expressionless. But inside, 1,000 calculations were already firing. Years of military training, instincts sharpened in far harsher places than this tourist-filled square. This wasn't going to end with words. That much was clear. And as Reed let his dog inch closer, leash loosening with every step. The real test was about to begin, not just for Harrison's discipline, but for his deeper skills, the kind that no tourist ever sees behind the shine of brass buttons. And that, my friends, is where we move deeper into this story. Because behind that stoic figure in red and black stands a man with a history far richer than ceremony, a man whose past would turn the tide of this confrontation in a way no one watching could have imagined. Let me tell you about Guard Harrison, and why he was exactly the right person, in the right place, at the right moment. To the casual eye, James Harrison looked like every other Royal Guard. Impeccable posture, scarlet tunic crisp in the morning sun, black bearskin hat towering above his steady gaze. Tourists often whispered, how do they stand so still for hours? But what they didn't know, what they couldn't see, was that behind that calm exterior stood a man forged in fire far from Buckingham Palace. Before he ever wore the red coat, Harrison wore a different uniform. Camouflage, dusty from the sands of Afghanistan. He served 2 tours as part of the British Army, not standing guard, but navigating real battlefields, where every decision meant life or death. And more than that, he spent 3 years in the Royal Army Veterinary Corps, the elite unit responsible for training and rehabilitating military working dogs. Yes, that same unshakable guard standing before Reed and his snarling bulldog once spent his days calming bomb-sniffing dogs trembling from shellfire. He knew the language of animals not through words, but through tiny, invisible signs, a flicker of an ear, the shifting weight on their paws, the conflict between trained instinct and forced aggression. You see, when Reed believed he could use brute force and fear to control his dog, Harrison already understood the deeper truth. Real authority doesn't come from fear. It comes from calm, confident leadership. That's the kind of leadership he had practiced with traumatized military dogs in war zones. And now, standing at Buckingham Palace, he recognized the same signs in the bulldog before him: aggression on the surface, but confusion underneath. A creature caught between the violent commands of its owner and the steady, silent presence of the guard before it. It's a common mistake, really. So many people, even today, think strength means domination, that to control means to intimidate. But Harrison's career had taught him a different lesson. True strength is quiet. It's the kind that steadies a panicked dog in a helicopter. The kind that calms a fellow soldier when everything around is chaos. And here, in this royal courtyard, it was the kind of strength that would decide whether this confrontation ended in violence or in transformation. Think about it. How often in our own lives do we confuse loudness for leadership? Whether it's in politics, at work, even in families, the ones who shout the loudest often get attention. But it's the calm, steady voices that actually guide us through. And as Harrison stood motionless, his mind was already working, reading every shift in the dog's stance, calculating every possible move. His military training and his deep understanding of animals were about to come together in a way that no one watching, not Reed, not the frightened crowd, could have predicted. Because while Reed believed he had the upper hand, with his snarling beast and his threats, Harrison knew the real key. He had the knowledge, the discipline, and the respect for the creature before him. And in moments, he would prove that true authority doesn't need to shout, it speaks in calm, controlled action. But before we get to that remarkable turning point, let's take a step back and look deeper into an unsettling truth. The dark, often hidden world where animals are weaponized, used not as companions but as tools of intimidation. And why this act at Buckingham Palace was far more serious and far more dangerous than most people realized. As the crowd at Buckingham Palace held its breath, watching Reed edge his bulldog closer and closer, many probably thought, it's just a man showing off, just a little mischief. But to someone like Harrison, and to anyone who's worked with animals in service, this was no harmless show. This was something darker, something dangerous. You see, turning an animal into a weapon isn't new. Across history, humans have tried to harness the strength of animals for battle and intimidation. From war elephants in ancient times to attack dogs in modern conflict zones, animals have been forced into roles that go against their nature, used not as partners, but as tools of fear. And sadly, it still happens today. In the UK, the Dangerous Dogs Act makes it clear. Using a dog to threaten someone is a criminal offense. And in the US, many states have even harsher penalties. In California, for example, using a dog to attack or intimidate can lead to felony charges and years in prison. There have been real cases where people, thinking they were just defending themselves or showing who's boss, ended up facing serious jail time because they turned their pets into instruments of violence. Take the case in Texas a few years ago, where a man used his dog to chase and bite a postal worker. It wasn't just an accident. He encouraged the dog, cheered it on. That man went to prison, and his dog was taken away, labeled as dangerous. The tragedy: the dog wasn't born violent. It was trained, or rather, mistreated into becoming something it was never meant to be. And that's exactly what was unfolding here at Buckingham Palace. Reed wasn't just provoking a guard, he was corrupting the true nature of the bulldog at his side. Bulldogs, especially those bred in Britain, carry a noble history. Once symbols of courage and resilience, they were meant to stand strong with people, not against them. But in Reed's hands, Cupcake had become a weapon. His growls stoked, his instincts twisted, his loyalty abused. It's an uncomfortable truth, but one we need to face. When animals are used this way, it's never really about the animal. It's about the person holding the leash, about their need to feel powerful by making others feel afraid. And that's where the deeper danger lies. Because when someone chooses to weaponize an animal, they're not just breaking the law, they're breaking trust. Trust between humans and animals, and trust within the community. No one should have to fear walking through a public space, wondering if the next unleashed dog is a threat, not a companion. It's a lesson that echoes beyond this palace courtyard. Whether in the UK or the US, whether with dogs or in other forms, the misuse of power, especially over those who cannot speak for themselves, always leaves damage behind. And yet, even in the midst of this dark reality, there's hope. Because in the story we're telling today, something remarkable happened next. While Reed believed fear would win, Harrison was preparing to show that understanding and respect could transform even the most aggressive energy. But before we witness that turning point, that powerful moment where everything shifted, let's take a moment to truly appreciate the incredible history and noble spirit of the bulldog itself. A breed often misunderstood, yet capable of greatness when guided with care. Let me take you back in time to where the bulldog's real story begins. Before Cupcake stood growling in that courtyard, before the tension thickened around Buckingham Palace, his ancestors walked a very different path, one marked by courage, loyalty, and service. You see, the British bulldog isn't just a mascot or a family pet. It carries within its stout body a history that runs deep in the veins of British tradition. Long ago, bulldogs were bred for strength and resilience. In the 13th century, they were used in a brutal sport called bull baiting, a cruel practice where dogs were set against bulls for public entertainment. It was a harsh beginning, and yet, through those difficult years, something remarkable was forged in the breed. A kind of fearlessness, a refusal to back down, even in the face of overwhelming force. But as society evolved, so too did the bulldog. By the 19th century, bull baiting was banned, and the breed was carefully reshaped by dedicated breeders. They kept the bulldog's sturdy build and determined spirit, but softened its temperament. The once fierce fighter became a loyal companion, gentle with children, steadfast with families, and known for an almost comical stubbornness that made them beloved in homes across Britain. And then, during the dark days of World War II, the bulldog took on a new symbolic role. As Britain stood alone against the threat of invasion, Prime Minister Winston Churchill was often compared to the bulldog, stocky, resolute, unyielding. In fact, the bulldog came to represent the entire spirit of the British people during that time, determined, brave, and unwilling to surrender. Across the Atlantic, even in America, the bulldog earned admiration. Today, many as military units adopt a bulldog as their mascot, celebrating its tenacity and courage. From college campuses to marine bases, the bulldog's image stands tall as a symbol of strength and loyalty. So when we look at Cupcake, standing there in the palace square, we're not just seeing an angry dog. We're seeing the legacy of generations, animals bred not for chaos, but for companionship and courage. Animals meant to stand with people, not be used against them. It's a powerful reminder, isn't it, that what we inherit, whether in animals or in ourselves, carries potential for both greatness and destruction. It depends entirely on how we choose to nurture it. Left in the wrong hands, strength can turn to violence. But guided by respect and care, that same strength can become something noble. And in this story, as Reed tried to twist that legacy into fear, Harrison was preparing to remind everyone watching of the bulldog's true nature, not with force, but with understanding. Because the real turning point was still to come. In the next moments, as tension reached its peak and the leash finally snapped free, Harrison's years of experience with military dogs would come alive. And what unfolded would leave the crowd and the world in stunned silence. Let me show you what happened when fear clashed with true leadership, and how a single move transformed an attack into a moment of grace. When the leash slipped from Reed's fingers and the builder lunged forward, time seemed to freeze. The crowd gasped, some screamed. Parents instinctively shielded their children. For a heartbeat, it felt like chaos was inevitable, that violence would win the day. But then, something extraordinary happened. Guard Harrison moved, not with panic or brute force, but with the calm, precise grace of someone who had faced this very storm before. In one fluid motion, he dropped low, his white-gloved hands reaching not to strike, but to redirect. You see, what Harrison did in that moment wasn't random. It was the result of years of specialized training techniques passed down through generations of military dog handlers. Techniques designed not to hurt, but to diffuse. At the heart of it is something called pressure point control. Dogs, like humans, have spots on their bodies that, when touched in the right way, can shift their focus, interrupt aggression, and calm their nervous system. It's not magic, it's science, blended with deep understanding. Harrison's hands found those points behind Cupcake's shoulders and along his neck, guiding the dog's powerful momentum away from harm and into submission. In military circles, there's also something known as the calm hold. It's a technique where the handler uses firm, steady pressure, not to dominate, but to reassure, telling the animal, through touch alone, you're safe. You don't need to fight, and that's exactly what Harrison did. He didn't meet aggression with aggression. He met it with calm, confident control. It reminds me of stories from Afghanistan, where handlers would calm bomb-sniffing dogs during helicopter landings by using the same technique: steady hands, quiet commands, pressure applied in just the right places to say, "Trust me, I've got you." And those dogs, even in the chaos of war, would respond. Because animals know the difference between fear and authority. They feel it. And here's the deeper lesson for all of us. Real leadership, whether with animals or with people, doesn't shout. It doesn't rely on fear or brute strength. It speaks through confidence, consistency, and respect. Harrison's calm diffused what could have been a tragedy, not because he was the strongest man in the square, but because he was the most centered. Think about your own life. Whether at work, at home, or in moments of stress, how often do we escalate when calm would serve us better? How often do we try to overpower, when what's really needed is steady hands and quiet confidence? As Cupcake's growls faded and his body relaxed under Harrison's expert touch, the crowd's panic melted into astonishment. What they witnessed wasn't just control over an animal, it was mastery over fear itself. And yet, even as calm returned to the courtyard, the story wasn't over. Because while Harrison had shown what real authority looks like, the crowd and soon the police were beginning to understand just how dangerous Reed's actions truly were. So next, let's step back and look at the ripple effect of this confrontation. How fear in crowds can escalate danger, and why understanding this hidden force is key to preventing harm not just here at Buckingham Palace, but anywhere people gather. As Cupcake calmed under Harrison's steady hands, the energy in the courtyard shifted once again. The immediate danger had passed, but something subtler still hung thick in the air, the raw, uneasy hum of a crowd that had come dangerously close to panic. Because here's the truth that often goes unnoticed. In moments like this, it's not just the aggressor and the defender who shape the outcome, it's the crowd. The way people react, consciously or not, can either escalate a situation or help bring it back from the edge. Psychologists call it crowd contagion. Emotions, fear, anger, even excitement spread quickly in groups. It starts small. A mother pulling her child back, a tourist gasping a little too loudly, someone fumbling for their phone to film. Each reaction adds fuel, building an invisible current that can push people toward chaos without anyone fully realizing it. We've seen this pattern play out before, haven't we? In viral videos from concerts, protests, even sports matches. One person shouts, another runs, and suddenly, what began as a minor incident snowballs into stampedes or violence. In fact, back in 2010, during the Love Parade festival in Germany, a sudden shift in crowd energy turned deadly. Dozens lost their lives, not because of an attacker, but because panic rippled too fast to stop. At Buckingham Palace that day, things could have turned ugly. Reed's taunts weren't just directed at Harrison, they were baiting the crowd too. He played on their fears, their instinct to watch danger unfold, their collective hesitation to act. And as Cupcake lunged, that wave of tension nearly tipped into something no one wanted. But thankfully, the opposite happened. Harrison's calm didn't just control the dog, it reset the energy in the square. His steady presence became an anchor, a silent signal to everyone watching. It's okay. Stay calm. No one needs to run. It's a powerful reminder of how leadership works in public spaces. The person who keeps their center can influence not just individuals, but entire groups. And that's a lesson we can carry into our own lives. Whether you're a teacher in a classroom, a parent in a busy park, or simply someone who finds themselves in a tense situation, your reaction matters. Stay calm, and you give others permission to do the same. Escalate, and you risk lighting the match that sets fear ablaze. So while much of the world would later focus on Harrison's handling of Cupcake, and rightly so, those who truly understood what happened saw the bigger picture. One man's calm diffused not just a dog's aggression, but the rising tide of fear in an entire crowd. But as order returned to the square, another force began moving in: the law. Because Reed's actions that day weren't just dangerous, they carried serious legal consequences. And as police closed in, the real weight of his choices was about to come crashing down. Let's take a closer look now at what the law says in both the UK and the US about using animals as weapons, and why Reed's stunt could have cost far more than his pride. As the last echoes of tension faded from the palace courtyard, another sound took its place: the firm, deliberate footsteps of law enforcement moving in. Reed, who only moments before had strutted with bravado, now found himself surrounded not by frightened tourists, but by calm professionals ready to hold him accountable, because in the eyes of the law, what he had done wasn't just reckless, it was criminal. Under UK law, specifically the Dangerous Dogs Act 1991, it is an offence to allow a dog to be dangerously out of control in a public place. And it doesn't even have to bite. Simply causing someone to fear injury is enough to bring charges. Add to that Reed's clear intent to provoke violence, his threats against an active duty guard, and the risk he posed to children and families nearby, and suddenly, the list of charges grew long and serious. In Reed's case, he faced multiple allegations: public endangerment, intentional animal abuse, disturbing the peace at a royal monument, and attempting to incite an attack on a member of Her Majesty's Guard. Charges that carry not just fines, but potential prison time. And let's be clear, this wasn't just about protecting the guard. It was about protecting every person in that square from harm, and about upholding the dignity of public spaces meant for peaceful enjoyment. And if you're watching from the US, you should know the laws are just as strict, sometimes even more so. In many American states, using an animal as a weapon, or even encouraging a dog to show aggression in public, can lead to felony charges. In California, for example, a man faced 5 years in prison for commanding his dog to intimidate a neighbor. In Texas, an owner was sentenced to jail after his unleashed dog chased a postal worker, causing injury and trauma. So this isn't just a story about Reed. It's a wake-up call, because many people, perhaps even with good intentions, forget that when they lose control of their animal in public, or use it to intimidate, they cross a legal line with real consequences. And beyond the legal penalties, there's the emotional and moral cost. Reed didn't just face arrest, he lost custody of his dog. Cupcake, once used as a pawn in his petty game, was taken by Animal Protection Services, destined now, hopefully, for a future where his noble breed instincts could be honored, not abused. It's a sobering thought, isn't it, that one moment of reckless bravado can ripple outwards, leaving legal trouble, broken trust, and damaged lives in its wake. But there's a brighter side to this story too. Because as Reed was led away in handcuffs, defeated and exposed, another image stood in sharp contrast: Harrison, calm and composed, with Cupcake now sitting peacefully at his feet, a living symbol of what real authority looks like. And that's where our story reaches its deeper meaning, because at its heart, this isn't just a tale about dogs, laws, or palace guards. It's about the difference between fear and respect, between those who try to control through intimidation and those who led through understanding. So now, let's step back and reflect. What can we learn from this powerful confrontation? And how can we apply its lessons not just in the world of animal care, but in how we show leadership in our own lives? Let's bring it all together in our final chapter, a lesson about true authority and why it always outshines fear. As the last chapter of this story unfolded, Reed in handcuffs, Cupcake calm and obedient, and guard Harrison returning quietly to his post, something deeper lingered in the air, far beyond the courtyard walls of Buckingham Palace. Because what we witnessed that day wasn't just a clash between a man, a dog, and a soldier. It was a living lesson about power, about the difference between those who try to command through fear and those who lead through respect and understanding. Reed believed that raising his voice, tightening his grip, and unleashing aggression would make him powerful. And for a while, it seemed to work. The crowd flinched, the dog growled, and people stepped back in fear. But when real authority entered the scene in the form of Harrison's calm presence, steady hands, and deep knowledge, fear crumbled. Respect took its place, and even the snarling bulldog recognized it, choosing submission and trust over violence. It's a pattern we see everywhere, isn't it? In workplaces, where some managers shout and threaten, while true leaders inspire loyalty by showing understanding. In families, where fear might force obedience for a time, but respect builds lasting bonds. Even in our own hearts, where controlling our fears with steady discipline always leads us farther than letting panic take the reins. And here's the most beautiful part. Animals, in their pure instinct, often see this truth more clearly than we do. Cupcake, a dog with generations of noble breeding, could feel the difference between the angry commands of his owner and the confident, respectful guidance of Harrison. In the end, he chose the leader who led not with threats, but with calm, earned trust. So the bigger lesson, for all of us, is simple but powerful. True authority doesn't shout. It doesn't rely on intimidation or fear. It speaks quietly, but firmly. It leads by example. And it earns respect, not through force, but through understanding. And perhaps, as we reflect on this story, we can ask ourselves, in my own life, where am I leading with fear? And where can I shift toward respect? Whether with our pets, our families, our colleagues, or even with ourselves, the choice is always there. Fear might get fast results, but respect, that builds something lasting, something noble. As the sun set over Buckingham Palace that evening, the tourists who had witnessed this event didn't just leave with photos and stories. They left with a memory of how calm strength overcame chaos, and how true leadership quietly transformed a moment of danger into a lesson in grace. And maybe that's the real gift of this story. A reminder that, in a world often loud and aggressive, the quiet power of respect still holds the greatest force of all. If this story has resonated with you, I invite you to share your thoughts in the comments below. How do you believe we can better lead in our homes, in our communities, and in the way we care for animals? If you believe, as I do, that true strength lies in understanding and respect, give this video a like and subscribe for more stories that celebrate courage, compassion, and real authority, because together we can choose to lead not with fear, but with something far more powerful: respect.